Are you a franchisor, whether early or established, looking for tips and tricks and fresh new ideas on taking your franchise company to the next level? I'm Angela Cote, and I call myself a franchise growth catalyst. I use my experience having grown up in the world of franchising, spending many years on the franchisor side of the franchise relationship, lots of time out in the field supporting franchisees, and then 18 years myself as a multi-unit franchisee. I'm super passionate about creating transformational impact to help franchise companies grow. If you are looking for ideas, we talk about anything from franchisee recruitment, how to find the best franchisees that are going to be the top performers in your brand, to how to support them to really optimize their output. We are more than open to hearing ideas and questions and suggestions. So reach out to me at angela@angelacote.com. Alrighty, let's get started with the Franchise Growth Catalyst podcast. Hello, everybody. Here we go with another episode of the Franchise Growth Catalyst podcast, the podcast where franchisors can find unconventional yet practical advice on how to improve franchisee profitability, create exponential growth, and of course, make franchising fun. Now, before we get started, I have a confession to make. It is late in the day on Friday once again, and it has been a very busy week, busy but awesome. And I'm a little tired. And so I was tempted to skip recording this week. And then my light bulb went off in my head and reminded me that at AC Inc., we have a core value that action equals growth. What that means is that sometimes we feel like we don't want to do something because it's not going to be that good. And by doing it, that doing something can be better than doing nothing. And so I know that if I hadn't recorded this now, then I'd probably go another whole week and not recording anything. And, you know, in full transparency, I wish that I could have taken the time to really get this organized before I record this, but then it would have never happened. So why am I telling you this? Is because I want to inspire you to do the same when you're feeling like, you know, it has to be perfect. And if I don't do it right, I shouldn't do it at all. You know, I've felt this over and over in the things that I do, that it's better to put something out there than nothing. So I might have even poured myself a glass of my favorite Pinot Grigio, my favorite Italian Pinot Grigio for this episode. And that'll be part of what will be my reward at the end. All right. So for today's episode, I would love to share some thoughts on the franchise recruitment process for new franchisors. You know, the more we talk to new emerging franchisors, especially like really early stage franchisors, the more it becomes evident that we need to talk differently about the franchise recruitment process than we talk about it for more established franchisors. So this is really geared towards franchisors that are just starting out. But I will say, if you're not just starting out, there's probably going to be a couple of nuggets or tips in here that you're going to pick up. So I'm going to share some thoughts. As I said, I didn't overthink this. I probably will hit on 50% of what I would like to talk about. So at least something's going to get out there. And if you're curious about anything I say or want more in-depth information on this, I mean, this is what we do. So reach out to me. Happy to have a conversation and share with you more of how we can help you with learning more about this process. So I'm going to start with this. I see all the time that new franchisors tend to get insecure about taking care of the franchise recruitment process. You know, they've got these franchise prospects that are interested in becoming a franchisee of their business. And once the franchisor starts to kind of put that out there to people in the franchise industry and community, they start to hear different things like do's and don'ts and things you should do and things you shouldn't do and things that are going to make or break whether you do it right. And I continuously see these emerging and micro-emerging franchisors losing their confidence about their ability to do something really well, especially when it comes to franchise recruitment. And so I think they get insecure because of what they hear from others. They also are thinking about the amount of money they're taking. I'm taking a lot of money from this person, and this person is going to be expecting me to, help them grow this business. They're also getting into an agreement, and they've heard the nightmares about the agreement. So I can see why a new franchisor would get insecure and concerned with taking on this part of the process. But I strongly believe that you are still the best person as an emerging franchisor. You just need some help. You just need some coaching and guidance. I don't recommend that you outsource your franchise recruitment process and your franchise sales at the very beginning. I do think it's definitely a great thing to explore. And there's lots of great service providers out there, but I don't think it should be before you've done it yourself. So I'm going to give you some tips today on things that might help your confidence so that you feel like you can do it, and really help you understand that the reason that you're the best one to do it is because you're the one that knows the culture of your brand, your core values, the things that matter, and the kind of person that you're looking for. Now, you probably need, I might have just taken a sip of my reward that's supposed to come at the end of this podcast. Now, you probably need some help identifying who you're looking for. I also hear this a lot, I would do it, but I don't know if I'm vetting them properly. Well, the answer to that, or at least the starting point there, is go check out the podcast that I created on the DNA of a top performing franchisee. Or again, you can reach out and we'll help you work through what to look for and how to vet a franchise prospect. However, assuming that's taken care of, or that you've got someone helping you with that, or the confidence, understand that the new franchisor, I believe, should learn to do their own franchise recruitment, I would say, for the first 2 or 3-ish franchisees. Because by that point, you'll have talked to a lot of people, because there's going to be a lot of people that you talk to that are not going to make the cut. So by getting to 2 or 3, you'll have had that experience. So I really recommend you focus on getting those first 2 or 3 and doing that yourself. Now, what I want to really encourage you to do is to not get too caught up in a lot of the things you're hearing, again, from experts in the industry about the industry standards. Okay. So you're probably going to hear that the cost per closed deal is $10,000. You're going to hear things like the number of leads, people you got to talk to get someone to actually sign, is 100. Those things are just, I don't believe, true for you when you're getting your first or second franchisee. As you've probably heard, your first and second and third probably franchisees are going to come from within your network. They're most likely to be customers, friends, family, employees, or people that are already aware of your brand. And they probably aren't going to cost you $10,000 to find if you do it right. And if you understand that it's initially not the best use of your money to go spending a ton of money on leads for to reach out to people that have never even heard of you. So that's another conversation for another day. But be careful that you don't get caught up in that, thinking that you have to talk to 100 people to get one closed at the very beginning. Okay. So another thing that I want you to not get too caught up in is the number of steps. You're going to hear, if you haven't already, people say things like, it should be a 7-step process. Well, that's true when you've had a lot of practice and you've been able to streamline things, get clear on who you're looking for, and you've talked to enough people to know right away, this person's not going to be a fit. But at the very beginning, even if you bring in an experienced sales professional, they are not necessarily going to be able to know that right away for you, for your brand. So be very careful that you don't get caught up in thinking that if I take more than 7 steps, I'm a failure. Okay. So it's more important in the beginning to do as many steps as you need with the franchise candidate to make sure that they're right. So it could be 4 steps or it could be 20 steps. Don't worry about that right now. And don't worry about how much time each step takes. Now, I definitely would say that on the very first call you have with the prospect, don't take them for lunch. Don't spend a weekend with them. Like, I would recommend for the very first call at the very, very beginning that you just do a quick call. You tell them in advance, if someone reaches out and says, I'm interested in this franchise or this opportunity, like they might not even use the word franchise. They're probably not looking for a franchise. They just like your business. And they're like, I really like this, sushi place, or I really like this wax bar or salon or whatever it is. I would like to own one of these. Then you say, okay, cool. So the first thing we'd like to do is let's get on a call. Like, I don't know how, pretend they've reached out to you by email or you've had a conversation. Keep the first conversation on the shorter side so you don't waste a ton of time. Now, the first couple times, usually people go long, and that's fine. But work towards getting that first call to be on the shorter side to show them that your time is valuable and that, hey, I'd love to talk further, but let's just first have a quicker call to see if it's worth us setting up a longer call. That keeps you in a position of strength and keeps you in control of the process. Okay. So then when you get onto the next call and the call after that, that's where, yes, set boundaries and have time frames, like the call will be 1 hour and stick to that, but don't worry about it being exact right now. Especially the first few times you do this, don't beat yourself up. Just think about, take a step back and use your brain and use your gut instincts. Also, the order of the steps, or actually before I talk about the order, the amount of time it can take. You'll hear people say, well, it should take, 3 to 6 months, or, oh, we've got our process down to 30 days. Well, that's easy to say when you've done it a bunch, or you've got experience in franchising. And if you're new to this, you've got to tune that out. Okay. So if it takes, and I guarantee if you talk to franchise development people that have been doing franchise sales and franchise development for a long time, they'll tell you it's very common where you lose a candidate for a little bit. They weren't ready and they come back a year later or 18 months later. That's okay. And that happens in sales and people are just getting comfortable or they weren't ready. So let go of that concern about the amount of time it takes, but do keep the nurturing and the momentum going. Don't just leave them hanging. Okay. So I'll come to that actually in a minute. I'm going to come back to that, but don't overthink the order of steps, the process, all that. Just think about what makes sense. Now, in terms of the order of the steps, you do want a process to some extent. Okay. So you want to sort of customize what's going to be your process. So, and this is something we teach people, but it kind of on the surface, it's like initial call, the next call, you want to do more of a deeper dive into like, what's their why are they interested? Tell them a little bit more about your brand, so it's a combination of vetting and selling, in that next step. And there's, there's steps, but as you go, what's working, call that your process. Okay. So don't panic if you do something different than other people because it works for you or something like that. There are certain things though, which I'm going to talk about in a minute, that can really create exhaust points in the process that I'll just bring up in a minute. But in general, cut yourself some slack as you're figuring things out in terms of the order of the steps. Okay. Don't compare yourselves to other franchisors. Don't even compare yourselves to other franchisors at the same stage as you, because it like, for example, if they have, you might be a brick and mortar you might be a brick and mortar brand and they might be a mobile service brand. It is a lot easier to get a franchise candidate from initial conversation to closing when you're not dealing with figuring out real estate or investment levels. If it's a lower investment, it's going to be a lot easier than if it's a big investment. So, comparing is really risky and it can really discourage you. And I talk a lot about mindset, and I really don't want, you to get in that negative mindset, because that energy, people feel that energy. They feel that scarcity mode that you're in. So be really careful of that, of that competition or comparison. I think what's the expression? Comparison is the thief of happiness. Okay. So be careful in the comparing. Step back, use your gut. You might be thinking, well, I heard that, if you don't do it this way or you don't do it that way. When you hear that, think about those things you hear, really give it some hard thought. And if you're still believing it and it's still making you nervous or worrying you, reach out to somebody like myself or somebody that you trust in franchising and ask them like, hey, is it possible that for us, this might not apply because it feels like I should do it this way? And most likely, if they're trustworthy and honest, probably it is okay. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about a couple of things in the process. Again, I'm only just going to touch on these things. Maybe I'll do a part 2 of this podcast, this content at some point. But for today, because something's better than nothing, and I wanted to get something out there this week, I'm going to talk about a couple of things: the application, the FDD, and discovery day. So, application. So most franchisors have, at some point, they have an application that they get the franchisee to fill out. And it asks everything from name, address, and, education and work history to net worth. Put yourself in the shoes of a franchise prospect. You are just meeting somebody. You've had maybe one call with them, and they ask you to fill this application and tell them your net worth. Do you really want to do that? That could be a real turnoff for people. And I've seen it happen over and again, where the exhaust point is when that application goes out and all of a sudden people don't hear from the candidate again. So 2 ways to deal with that. 3 ways really, actually. One is if you want to get that information earlier in the process, you for some reason feel like it's important to you, you can still send the application and tell them, hey, if you get to any, on the call, say, I'm going to send you an application after this. Feel free to, we love to know as much as we can about you because that'll help us in our process here. But if there's anything that you're not ready to share, that's okay. We can come back and do that part later. Okay. Now, if you do that, what you do want to do is make sure that you verbally qualify that they have access to the capital or believe that they do, or get a read on that. So again, somebody who's really experienced in franchise recruitment might say, oh no, I won't talk to anybody if they're not qualified financially. Well, don't forget, some people haven't really explored who else in their network might be interested in investing. Maybe they've got an uncle or a cousin or a family member who has the money and wants to be a silent partner in the business. Or maybe they don't realize that you have financing connections and options for them, or there's grants out there or alternative lenders. So I would start in that first call. If you're going to do this with what I'm saying with the application process, where you say that they don't have to tell you their net worth on the front end, I would in the first call, I would say something like, just so you know, the investment for this franchise are you aware of the investment being around $200,000? And they say, yep. You say, okay, so are you going to need to finance that? Or what's your capital situation? Are you going to need support for that? Just ask them tactfully. And if they say, oh yeah, financing will not be a problem for me, I've got, my house as collateral, or whatever they're telling you, you can read them by asking that question, and whether you feel like their answer is giving you that sense of confidence to at least go to the next step, or the step after that, and then get them to tell you their net worth and do the background. Again, you're going to hear a lot of people in franchising, and I might even get some hate mail from this, but not hate mail, but I might get people saying, no, you have to do it on the front end. Well, you might lose people, and you got to weigh that out. Personally, I think you've got to respect the fact that people might not be ready to share their very private net worth information. So that's one thing to think about, or one way to do it. A second way to deal with the application process is it's kind of the same as the first. It's sort of just a little bit of a tweak, is to take that part out of your application and keep it more simple, and then send them the net worth part of the application after 1 or 2 more calls, when you've been able to build more of a relationship and trust. And then the third option is to just move it further down the process. So always verbally, I would always do the verbal version of qualifying them financially. And then later in the process, at some point, you could bring that application into the equation. So those are 3 ways you can deal with the application. I'm just going to quickly touch on the FDD for a minute here. I get this question a lot. When should we disclose? When should we show them the FDD? Do we want them to see our numbers? In general, I would say for the average single unit candidate who has never owned a franchise and is coming to you because they aren't as business savvy as a person that would start their own business, they need that support. They like the idea of having that support. For those people, I would say it's about the third call where you're starting to get into the FDD. So you've the first call, you're doing a real quick initial call. Second, maybe even second and third call, you're doing more getting to know you. And maybe even there's 3 calls getting to know you. And then you say, okay, well, let's get into the showing you the legal details, the terms of the agreement and our disclosure process. What I recommend you do, regardless, is to, on a Zoom call, or if you get to be in person, pull it up and not to draw negativity or attention to anything, but to say, typically the areas that people have the most questions about are the costs and the financials of the business. Take them directly to, item 6, item 7. Well, that's in the US and Canada. I'm not exactly sure because I think it varies, but take them to the part that shows the ongoing costs, the initial costs, like the initial investment. And if you're doing an earnings representation or an item 19 that shows some of the metrics of the business, which I highly recommend, and that's another call for another day, but take them to those, because if they have any questions, you can answer them on the spot. The sort of thinking there is that if you send them the FDD and you don't give them any, and they're not super business savvy and this is new for them, it can be very overwhelming. The next thing you know, they take that to a corporate lawyer who doesn't know franchising, and that person says, oh man, this is crap. This is all in the favor of the franchisor. Well, in franchising, that's a good thing because we want to keep consistency. But if someone doesn't know that and starts whispering in their ear that this is not a good idea, all of a sudden you could lose them. So if you've heard them ask anything prior to showing them the FDD that gets answered in the FDD, you could also direct them to that first, like walk them through a little bit of that before you send them the FDD. And then when you send them the FDD, I also like the idea of setting up a call to say, okay, when you receive this, let's set up a call for the day after so that you catch them while it's still fresh and before they start to make up stuff in their head. Okay. So that's what I would recommend for the kind of average single unit franchisee, especially someone that is a, customer or employee that's never even thought about franchising. They've never seen an FDD, wait till you've built that relationship and built some trust. Now I get this question. What if they're asking for the numbers? Now, first of all, if they're asking for the numbers on the front end a lot, that might maybe be a red flag. It might be a signal that they're just going to be so concerned with making money and they're not as passionate about the brand. There's a lot more to dig into with that. It's not for sure, but definitely something to look into. Now, if they're a business savvy investor and they ask you for the FDD early on and you like them and you feel like they might be a fit, like I wouldn't just send it out to anybody, although if you're in a registration state, they can get it publicly online anyway. Keep that in mind. And that's in the US only, not Canada, and not anywhere else necessarily. But if they're asking for it and you feel like they're a viable candidate, then you could send them the FDD sooner. They're going to know how to read it, especially if they're thinking multi-units. Now, you might still want to sort of assert a little bit of authority or authority over the process or control and say, we're more than happy to show you the FDD. The first thing we like to do, though, is just get on a quick call and do a bit of a back and forth meet and greet to make sure it makes sense for us to even take that step. You could absolutely insert that. Everything's situational, so it would depend on the situation. So, all right. So that's all I'm going to say for now, because I want this podcast to be enough of a bite-sized chunk that it doesn't take up your whole day. But just sort of in closing, I will say that when you have a candidate, I mentioned about keeping the momentum going. I'm not saying when I said earlier that some people talk about it being almost like a race to get them closed. The fear of that is obviously that you don't do enough vetting then. And I'm not saying not to think about the timing. What I'm saying is not to feel like you need to push the candidate fast into the process at this early stage that you're at. But I do think it's really important to set up weekly touch points. So my recommendation to people is when you've got a candidate that you're liking and they're continuing to take each step forward, is to set up a time on a weekly basis where you are going to talk to them, check in, and you can say, hey, like let's find a time, say Tuesday at 12 p.m. Pacific. or I'm in the Pacific time zone or whatever time zone you're in. And we're going to talk, and even if we don't need to talk, we can remove it from the calendar, but it's just a quick check-in. Just get that set up. It just shows, again, sort of this, that you're in control of things, and that you have a process that makes you come across as professional. And just, it helps block out that time in your calendar. And as you get busier, that kind of thing is really helpful to do. So I really recommend that. I'm going to throw in a quick shout out here to one of our amazing clients of AC Inc., Chris Ramo from Happy Cat Hotel. He is recording a podcast where every week he meets with his franchisees that have now signed on. He was meeting with them prior every week, and now they've signed on. It's his first franchisees. He's recording their weekly meetings. So if you are curious about what it's like to onboard a franchisee, or if you know of somebody who's thinking of becoming a franchisee, it's a fantastic podcast to hear what goes on, and the musings and the challenges and the wins and the losses of, finding a location and getting everything in order. So definitely recommend you check it out. Oh, what's it called? I think it's called Happy Cat Hotel Franchising, but feel free to direct message me and I can get you a link if you want. But really understand that you are the one that started this business. You are the one that knows your business. Trust in yourself. I do encourage you, if you like this idea of doing your own recruitment, I hope I inspired you and motivated you to take it on. It's not as big a deal as you think. We can help you with that, or find somebody that you trust that can coach and guide you, at least to get the first few franchisees. From there, all good. You can outsource or bring someone in-house to do that work, and again, get someone to coach them. But when you have that confidence, it's going to help you make sure that when the outsourced person or the other person that's doing the work is bringing candidates to you, you will be so much more confident that they are a fit for your brand. All right. I will wrap it up there. I'm going to go have my Friday night. I really hope this brought you some value. I hope I inspired you to some extent. It would mean so much to me to hear from you. What is a key takeaway that you got from listening? Whether that's send me a message if you're seeing this on social media, and you can DM me or YouTube or wherever you're listening or watching. I would love to know. It would mean so much to me if you would subscribe. I want to help more people in franchising. I want to get the word out about the things that we do. We take a non-traditional approach. We try to really help people authentically. And so if you believe that that is what we're doing and you want to help us, that would be amazing to get your support. All right, we're going to wrap it up there. Now go be awesome.